Do you know that the human hand is made up of 27 bones, and together they enable us to perform everything from delicate tasks like threading a needle to powerful actions like lifting weights? And today we are going to explore the incredible anatomy of the upper limb. We'll break down the skeletal structure, dive into the major muscle groups, and finally take a close look at the nerve supply. Whether you're a medical student, a healthcare professional, or just someone fascinated by human biology, this video will give you a solid understanding of how our upper limbs function. If you find this content helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos like this. Now let's get started. The upper limb is divided into major anatomical regions, which are the shoulder, arm, forearm, and the hand. The shoulder is the region of the upper limb that connects the upper limb to the trunk, and it includes the shoulder girdle. So this is the shoulder. This is the shoulder, and then we have the arm. Is the region between the shoulder and the elbow. The region between the shoulder and the elbow is the arm, and then this is the elbow here. This is the arm. The forearm is the region between the elbow and the wrist. This is the forearm, and then this is the wrist. The hand is the distal part of the upper limb and is involved in fine motor skills. It contains the carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. This is the hand. This is the hand. So it's the distal part of the upper limb. All these regions of the upper limb together, they provide mobility. That is, they provide a wide range of motion, crucial for reaching and manipulation. And there's also dexterity. That is, they allow for precise movements, particularly in the hand and fingers. Strength for supporting, lifting, and pushing and pulling tasks. And they facilitate detailed tasks such as writing or threading a needle, and that's precision. Moving on, the bones of the upper limb. The shoulder girdle is made up of the clavicle and the scapula. The shoulder girdle is made up of the clavicle and the scapula. The clavicle acts as a strut to keep the scapula in place. This is the clavicle. This S-shaped bone is the clavicle. It keeps the scapula in shape, allowing for arm movements. The scapula provides attachment points for muscles and articulates with the humerus. This is the scapula. This is the scapula. The humerus, which is the bone in the arm, is the single long bone of the upper arm. It articulates with the scapula at the shoulder and with the radius and the ulna at the elbow. This is the humerus, articulates with the scapula at the shoulder, and then with the radius and humerus at the radius and the ulna at the elbow. The forearm is made up of the radius and the ulna. The radius is located on the lateral side. This is the lateral side, and this is the medial side. And the ulna is located on the medial side of the forearm. And together they are important for pronation and supination. Pronation and supination of the forearm. The hand is made up of 8 carpal bones that form the wrist. This is the wrist. 8 carpal bones that form the wrist, and metacarpals, 5 of them forming the palm. 5 metacarpals forming the palm, and then we have 14 phalanges. These are the 14 phalanges. Moving on to the joints of the upper limb. The upper limb has 9 joints. 9 joints. We have the sternoclavicular joints, the acromioclavicular joints, the shoulder joints, the elbow joints, the radioulnar joints, the wrist joints, the carpometacarpal joint, the metacarpophalangeal joint, and the interphalangeal joints. Those are the major joints in the upper limb. The sternoclavicular joint is the articulation between the sternum and the clavicle, while the acromioclavicular joint is the articulation between the acromion and the clavicle. The shoulder joint is a ball and socket joint, providing the most mobility of any joint in the body. The elbow joint is the hinge joint formed by the humerus, radius, and ulna, and allows flexion and extension. Radioulnar joint is a pivot joint at the proximal and distal ends, allowing for pronation and supination of the forearm. The wrist joint is a condyloid joint that allows for flexion, extension, adduction, and abduction. The hand joint contains the carpometacarpal joints, metacarpophalangeal joints, and the interphalangeal joints. The carpometacarpal joints allow for the movement of the thumb and is the articulation of the carpal bones with the metacarpal bones. The metacarpophalangeal joints connect the metacarpal to the phalanges. The interphalangeal joint is the hinge joint between the phalanges, allowing flexion and extension. Remember, the wrist joint is the articulation between the radius and the carpal bones. The ulna does not articulate with the carpal bones. So you can see in this diagram, you can see the sternoclavicular joints, the acromioclavicular joints, the glenohumeral joint, and you can also see the elbow joint here, the wrist joints, and then you have the hand joints. Those are the carpometacarpal joints, the interphalangeal joints, and also we have the what metacarpophalangeal joints. Metacarpophalangeal joints. Then moving forward, we have the muscles of the upper limb. Let's talk about the muscles of the upper limb. The shoulder muscles are the deltoid muscle, which are responsible for abduction, flexion, and extension of the arm. We also have the rotator cuff muscle as part of the muscles of the upper limb, which are the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis that stabilize the shoulder joints. The arm muscles are the biceps brachii and the tricep brachii. The bicep brachii flexes the elbow and supinates the forearm. The tricep brachii extends the elbow. The forearm muscles are the flexors and the extensors. The flexors are located on the anterior side of the forearm and they flex the wrist and the fingers. The extensors are located on the posterior side and they extend the wrist and the fingers. We have the intrinsic hand muscles, which are the tena and the hypotenal muscles, the lumbricals and the interossei. They are responsible for the fine movements of the fingers. So in this diagram, you can see the deltoid muscle. Deltoid muscle. See the deltoid muscle. That's the shoulder muscle. Deltoid muscle. You can see the teres major, the infraspinatus, the supraspinatus. So those are the rotator cuffs. You can see the bicep, the muscles, the muscle of the arm. You can see the extensors extending the wrist and the fingers. You can see the flexor. You can see them, the flexors. You can see the tena and the hypotenal muscles. You can see the flexors here also. So they flex the wrists and the fingers. Moving on to the nerve supply of the upper limb. The upper limb is innervated by spinal nerves, and these spinal nerves form what we call brachial plexus. The brachial plexus is formed by the ventral rami of the cranial of the cervical nerve 5 to T1, cervical nerve 5 to thoracic nerve 1. It has roots, trunks, divisions, cords, and terminal branches. The major nerves that comes out of the brachial plexus are the axillary nerve, radial nerve, the median nerve, ulnar nerve, and musculocutaneous nerve, and each of them innervates the upper limb. The axillary nerve innervates the deltoid and the teres minor. The radial nerve supplies the extensors of the arm and forearm. The median nerve controls most of the flexors of the forearm and some hand muscles. The ulnar nerve supplies the intrinsic muscles of the hand, and the musculocutaneous nerve supplies the bicep brachii, the brachialis, and the coracobrachialis. So in this diagram here, you can see the picture of the axillary nerve. You can see the radial nerve, the musculocutaneous nerve, the ulnar nerve, the median nerve that innervates most of the anterior compartment of the forearm. So you can see the brachial plexus on the right. There's the brachial plexus, and it gives us these terminal branches: the ulna, the median nerve, the radial nerve, the musculocutaneous nerve, and the axillary nerve. Now let's go on to the blood supply of the upper limb. The major arteries that supply blood to the upper limbs are the subclavian artery, axillary artery, brachial artery, the radial and ulnar arteries. The subclavian artery gives rise to the axillary artery and is a branch of the brachiocephalic trunk. The subclavian artery arises from the brachiocephalic trunk. The axillary artery is a continuation of the subclavian and supplies the shoulder and the upper arm. The brachial artery is a continuation of the axillary and supplies the arm and branches into radial and ulnar arteries. That is, the terminal branches of the brachial arteries are the radial and ulnar arteries. The radial and ulnar arteries supply the forearm and hand. Let's go on to the venous drainage. The venous drainage of the upper limb is divided into two: superficial and deep veins. Superficial veins and deep veins. The superficial veins are the cephalic vein, which is located on the lateral side of the arm, while the basilic vein is located on the medial side of the arm. Together they form the superficial venous drainage. The deep veins, they follow the arteries including the brachial vein. So we have the ulnar vein, the radial vein. They follow the arteries and they all drain into the subclavian vein. That is, both the superficial veins and the deep veins, they all drain into the subclavian vein, which is the major vein returning blood to the heart from the upper limb. It terminates in the brachiocephalic vein. So let's move on. You can see in this picture what I've been saying. You can see the axillary artery here. You can see the brachial artery, the radial and the ulnar artery, the terminal branches of the brachial artery. You can see the subclavian artery. You can see the brachiocephalic trunk that gives rise to the subclavian artery. And on the side of the veins also, you can see the basilic and the brachial vein. You can see the cephalic vein. You can see the axillary and the subclavian vein. You can see the ulnar vein here, and then the radial vein. So these are the blood supply and venous drainage of the upper limb. So we are going to talk about the lymphatic system of the upper limb also. The lymphatic system is made up of nodes and vessels, that is, lymph nodes and lymphatic vessels. The lymph nodes of the upper limbs are the axillary lymph nodes, and they are the central, lateral, and apical nodes. They are key in draining lymph from the upper limb and breast. The lymphatic vessels are divided into superficial vessels and deep lymphatic vessels. The superficial lymphatic vessels, they drain skin and superficial tissues, while the deep lymphatic vessels, they drain deeper tissues and accompany the arteries. The surface anatomy of the upper limb now. We have the key landmarks of the upper limb. We have the clavicle, the acromion, the olecranon, the radial stylus. These are surface markings of the bones of the upper limb, and they are palpable through the skin. On the surface, you can palpate them. For example, the clavicle is subcutaneous. So in this diagram, you can see the clavicle here. It's just under the skin. Clavicle is subcutaneous. You can see the olecranon here. You can see the acromion process here. So they are palpable. You can see the styloid process here also. They are palpable surface marking of the bones of the upper limb. Also, we can palpate pulses. And what are the palpable pulses of the upper limb? We have the brachial pulse, the radial pulse, the ulnar pulse. The radial pulse can be palpated on the lateral side of the flexor carpi radialis, that's on the wrist. The ulnar pulse can be palpated on the medial side of the wrist, while the brachial pulse can be palpated in the cubital fossa. So, moving on to the clinical correlations. The common injuries that occur in the upper limbs are the clavicle fractures, the humerus fractures, the radius and ulnar fractures. We also have shoulder dislocation, the elbow dislocation, and nerve injuries like carpal tunnel syndrome, ulnar nerve entrapment. The clavicle fractures often is due to falls on a outstretched hand, and the humerus fractures can result in radial nerve injury. The radius and ulnar fractures are common in falls also. The shoulder dislocations are typically anterior and they affect the axillary nerve. The elbow dislocations are often posterior and are associated with ligament injuries. The nerve injuries are the carpal tunnel syndrome, which is the compression of the median nerve at the wrist. The ulnar nerve entrapment also that can occur at the elbow, known as cubital tunnel syndrome, or at the wrist. The surgical considerations, such as the shoulder arthroscopy, is a minimally invasive surgery for rotator cuff repairs, and the carpal tunnel release also is a surgery to alleviate pressure on the median nerve. That's the treatment for carpal tunnel syndrome. So in these pictures, you can see the cubital syndrome here, cubital tunnel syndrome. That's entrapment of the ulnar nerve at the elbow. Here you can see the fractured humerus. Here you can see the fractured clavicle, the fractured radius and ulnar. You can see the carpal tunnel syndrome. So these are clinical correlations of the upper limb. So today we have covered the essential 32 bones and muscles that make up the upper limb and how they work together to enable movements. Understanding these structures is key for anyone in the medical field. If you have any questions or need further clarification, feel free to leave a comment below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Thanks for watching and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you.